If they go the whole like nine, like, you know, if it's every PlayStation console previously, that'd be great.
Yeah,
That's
that would
a
be
that's a day one buy for me.
it would
100%.
be unbelievable. Yeah, you would basically reinvigorate an entire market.
Yeah.
Like that'd be incredible. We might get to see that Gearbox game. Like I don't know if we're going to see games. If anything, we're going to see. If we are going to see games, we might see PS4 games running on PS5.
Yeah.
We might see Ghost of Tsushima, Last of Us 2, anything that's like first party. Hell, we might even see FF7 run on
Yeah.
PS5 hardware. That'd be really cool. If
Yeah,
it
like
can
I
run
was saying with like
FF7 at 60
that
frames,
whatever show it was where they showed the Spider-Man thing where they just zoom through the city and how fast it could load.
yeah,
Like that'll
that's
be it.
pretty
It'll
cool.
be to show off load times.
I think a lot of people we are pretty much at the point after playing FF7 and looking at how good Ghost of Tsushima and Last of Us 2 look. I think we finally hit that level where um, we are pretty much right on the cusp of having CGI esque visuals. So what we're going to be looking for now is more detail in environments. I think we discussed this before, where higher CPU speeds, that allow for larger loads and larger things to happen, and more detail in environments. You know, to have more open environments to allow for larger environments in general. These are going to be the things that are going to really dictate the next generation of video game consoles, because I believe that we've essentially hit peak right now in terms of how good games can look without reaching uncanny valley.
Yeah.
So
So
it really is going to come down to that.
there's good reach for like memory issues as well, and figuring out what like ways to fix memory issues
Yeah, 100%.
and storage and whatnot. Like the
Microsoft's
like having enough memory and everything to what were they saying with the Xbox to be able to pause and suspend multiple games. That's so cool.
It's very cool. I don't necessarily see why I would use it, because I'm not the kind of guy who. I mean, I think it's just in second nature for me to shut games off and then
Oh
go back
yeah,
to the
no,
next
yeah, I
game.
always just do standby, so I would use that constantly.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I think it would make more sense in your role because standby would be really fantastic to go through different games when you're trying to do recording and stuff like that.
Yeah, it would. Yeah. Speaking
Microsoft
of
said they
which,
aren't considering some other competition.
I gotta do Trials of Mana because the demo is out and that demo is on PS4,
That
Switch, and
demo.
PC.
It doesn't have online. Never mind.
What's
So
not
upsetting.
online?
Trials of Men. I don't think it has online co-op, right?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't even have local multiplayer.
We could play. We could do the. We
Uh,
could do a Trials of Mana thing like playthrough on
The OG
PC.
one, yeah.
Well, no, we could do it on PC and do remote play, right? Well, we're not remote play. That do the.
No, Collection of Mana one isn't on Steam. This is the remake, and that has no multiplayer at all.
Wow. Okay, that sucks.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yep.
Unless Microsoft says I can play my PS4 games in the new box, I'm getting a PS5. Um, I'm going to be getting both if I can this generation. I think that there's a couple of things that I've definitely missed out on for the Xbox One that I would have really enjoyed. But that's, since those games ended up coming to PC, it's not a big loss. But I'm also at
I
a
was
point
about
where
to
my
say, what did you miss
PC.
out on
Oh,
that
Jesus.
didn't come to PC? Hi.
Hi. That was terrifying. Um, one of the major things I think I wanted that I'm looking at right now is that I'm getting to a point in which I probably need to upgrade my PC very soon. So if I can play, like I kind of want to go back to consoles. A part of me misses consoles, honestly. Um, so if there was a viable way to go back and have like an experience that's comparable to PC, like if it's all about running games at higher frame rates and all stuff like that, because it's really the only separating factor between me and console games right now, is that console games just run like shit for the most part. If you're gonna promise me that both in this next generation that the PS5 and the Xbox Series X are going to do their best towards making frame rates the most important thing, I'm gonna be super on board.
Right,
100%.
and the only the only factor I consider with the Switch is its portability, and it's like the game. if you play on any console, they're not going to look as good as they can. If you're going to play something for its quality, you go for its PC port. But if it's going to be on
Right.
console, might as well do Switch unless there's something super, like, deal-breaking about it.
Right. By the way, it just started for everybody in the Discord, so if it's not
Oh,
working
jeez,
for you,
I
refresh.
fucked up the audio sources. Hold on. Ow. Fuck. Sorry, stream.
Yeah, no, it's bad. And if I was to upgrade my PC, Umbra, I would do more towards like upgrading my CPU.
Oh yeah, I do too. It sucks. The only thing I really need to upgrade is my CPU, but that requires replacing practically everything anyways.
Exactly, which is my biggest issue. You know what I mean? Where it's like it'd do better for the stream, but we're also like until we get like partner, and if we're ever gonna get like 100 people, there's really no reason to upgrade my PC because you guys can't do 1080p half the time anyway in your connections.
Right.
So,
and it's like I really I don't have a reason for constantly archiving footage. I keep buying multiple terabyte hard drives, but I really am not like in a position where I can archive massively, unfortunately. I've started to like delete and make room, and I really don't want to, but I can't hoard footage like I want to.
I'm really hoping for good news. I think really good PS5 news would make me feel much better about the absolute horrendous situation we're all in and how it's only getting increasingly more terrifying. So,
yeah, make games smaller, please.
Ooh, that'd be nice. Ooh, that would be so cool. I actually want to hear what they're going to do for game optimization. That'd be really dope.
Please, no more 150 gig downloads.
No, yeah, we need the base hard drive needs to be like 5 terabytes now.
Hi. Unfortunately, we had to cancel the talk that we had planned for GDC.
Learn how to compress. Well, the new Doom is actually 37 gigs, which is a really huge upgrade.
Yeah, that's a step up from the original.
Bring that to you than the one and only Mark Cerny.
There's our boy.
Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Jim. There will be lots of chances later on this year to look at the PlayStation 5 games. Today, I want to talk a bit about our goals for the PlayStation 5 hardware and how they influenced the development of the console. I think you all know I'm a big believer in console generations. Once every 5 or 6 or 7 years, a console arrives with substantially new capabilities. There's a lot of learning by the game developers, hopefully not too overwhelming, and soon there's games that could never have been created before. Now, it used to be that as a console designer, you'd somehow intuit what would be the best set of capabilities for the new console, and then build it in complete secrecy. For the PlayStation consoles, that period lasted through PlayStation 3, a powerful and groundbreaking console, but also one that caused quite a lot of heartache, as it was initially difficult to develop games.
Console for PlayStation 3 also was like $700 out the gate.
We've taken a different,
600,
roughly centered around
600
three principles. The first of these is listening to the developers, which is to say that a lot of what we put into a console derives directly from the needs and aspirations of the game creators. We definitely do have some ideas of our own, but at the core of our philosophy for designing consoles is that game players are here for the fantastic games, which is to say that game creators matter. Anything we can do to make life easier for the game creators or help them realize their dreams, we will do. So, about once every 2 years, I take a tour of the industry. I go to the various developers and publishers, sit down, and discuss how they're doing with the current consoles and what they'd like to see in future consoles. This requires weeks on the road, as reaching the bulk of the game creators involves talking to well over 100 people at something like 24 publishers and developers. And it is incredibly valuable.
Yes.
By the way, the feature most requested by the developers, that was an SSD, which we were very happy
it feels a bit ahead, but that's all right. It's just hardware talk.
Was required. I'll be doing a
There's
deep
no
He's
dive
like
on
3
the
seconds
SSD
ahead of me.
There's no
It's not
point in
systems
syncing on
later
YouTube.
in this talk. It's also key
Anyways,
to make
yeah.
generational leap
SSDs.
while keeping the console sufficiently familiar to game
Standard.
developers. I think about this in terms of balancing evolution and revolution. Now, with PlayStation 1, 2, and 3, the target
I
was
love
a
Mark Cerny, but
revolution
he
each time
definitely
with a
has the
brand
cadence
new
of a
feature
serial
set.
killer.
That was great in many ways, but time for the developers to get up and running got longer with each console. In the past, I've called this time to triangle. Here's what I had for those 3 consoles. To be clear, I'm not talking about time to make a game. Developers will be ambitious, and it may take them 6 years or so to realize their vision. What I'm talking about is that dead time before graphics and other aspects of game development are up and running, and trying to minimize that. On the other hand, if we're trying to reduce that dead time to 0, that means the hardware architecture can't change at all. We're handcuffed. We need to judge for each feature what value it adds and whether it's worth the increase in developer time needed to support it. So with PlayStation 4, we were able to strike a pretty good balance
He's
between
explaining
performance
his
and
evil
familiarity.
deeds.
We got required learning back to PlayStation 1 levels. With PS5, the GPU was definitely the area we felt the most tension between adding new features and keeping a familiar programming model. Ultimately, I think we've ended up with something under a month of getting up to speed. That feels like we're striking about the right balance. I'll go into a bit more detail later today about our philosophy with the GPU and the specific feature set that resulted from it. It's also very important for us, as the hardware team, to find
next cell
new dreams,
processor.
by which I mean something other than CPU performance, GPU performance, and the amount of RAM. The increase in graphics performance over the past 2 decades has been astonishing, but there are other areas in which we can innovate and provide significant value to the game creators, and through them, the players. That's why the SSD was very much on our list of directions to explore, regardless of what came out of the conversations with game developers and publishers. The biggest feature in this category is the custom engine for audio. That's today's final topic. The push for vastly improved audio, and in particular 3D audio, isn't something that came out of the developer meetings. It's much more the case that we had a dream
I think they
of
talked
what
about
might
this
be
at
possible 5 years from now,
CEC?
and then
I
worked
believe
out
it
the
was
number of
CEC. I don't
steps
remember
we
what it
could
was.
take to set us.
Yeah, I was gonna say audio is not like in
So here
demand, but it
again are the
definitely
3
does need to
principles. The
improve.
first being enabling the desires of developers to drive the hardware design. To me, the SSD really is the key to the next generation. It's a game changer. And it was the #1 ask from developers for PlayStation 5. As in, we know it's probably impossible, but can you put an SSD in it? That was a discussion we were also having internally. It was clear that the presence of a hard drive in every PlayStation 4 was having a positive impact. A lot of things that would simply have been impossible at Blu-ray disc speeds were now possible. At the same time, though, in 2015 and 2016, when we were having these conversations, developers were already banging up against the limits of the hard drive, and a lot of developer time was being spent designing around slow load speeds. I want to focus in on just one number here, which is how long it takes to load a gigabyte of data from a hard drive. The difficulty being that hard drives are neither particularly fast nor flexible. If all your data is in one block, which is frankly not very likely, you can load 50 to 100 megabytes a second, depending on where the data is located on the hard drive. Let's assume it's on the outer edge, which means loading a gigabyte takes 10 seconds. If you compress your game packages, you can fit more data on the Blu-ray disc and also effectively boost your hard drive read speed by the compression ratio. We support zlib decompression on PlayStation 4.
It's really bad that from my new job at tech stuff that I'm starting to understand a lot of what he's saying.
Unfortunately, though, it's highly likely that your data is scattered around in various files on the hard drive, as well as sourced from multiple locations within those files. So lots of seeks are needed at 2 to 50-ish milliseconds each. My rule of thumb is that the hard drive is spending 2/3 of its time seeking, and only 1/3 of its time actually loading data. Putting all of that together, a gigabyte is very roughly 20 seconds to load from a hard drive. Now, a gigabyte is not much data. Games are using 5 or 6 gigabytes of RAM on PlayStation 4, so boot times and load times can get pretty grim. Or to put that differently, as a player, you wait for the game to boot, wait for the game to load, wait for the level to reload every time you die, and you wait for what is euphemistically called fast travel. And all of that leads to the dream. What if we could have not
Wow.
just an SSD, but a blindingly fast SSD? If we could load 5 gigabytes a second from it,
My
what
only
would
concern
change?
is how large is the
Now,
SSD gonna
SSDs are
get
completely different from
without
hard drives.
inflating the
They
price
don't
of the
have
console.
sinks as
Well, that
such.
also comes down
If
to
you have a
compression.
5
What
gigabyte a
would it
second
allow
SSD,
for
you can read
compression
data
for
from 1,000
developers?
different locations
Yeah,
in
that
that second, pretty much at speed. As for time to load a gigabyte, this is next gen we're talking about, so memory is bigger. Instead, we should be asking how long to load 2 gigabytes. And the answer is about 1/4 of a second. I mean, that's amazing. We're talking 2 orders of magnitude, meaning very roughly 100 times faster. Which means at 5 gigabytes a second for the SSD, the potential is that the game boots in a second. There are no load screens. The game just fades down while loading a half dozen gigabytes and fades back up again. Same for a reload.
That'd be
You're
really cool.
immediately back in the action after you die. And fast travel becomes so fast it's blink and you miss it. As game creators, we go from trying to distract the player from how long fast travel is taking, like those Spider-Man subway rides, to being so blindingly fast that we might even have to slow that transition down. Pretty cool, right? But for me, this is not the primary reason to change from a hard drive to an SSD. The primary reason for an ultra-fast SSD is that it gives the game designer freedom. Or to put that differently, with a hard drive, the 20 seconds that it takes to load a
It's a
gigabyte
very good question,
can
Gwen.
sabotage the game that
But
the
I love Mark
developer
Cerny.
is trying.
Mark Cerny's very,
I think
very
almost
knowledgeable
all of us in
and
the room have
very
experienced this, maybe
impassioned
in
by
different
this.
ways. Say we're making an adventure game. and
This
we have
hard drive
2
issue
rich
has been an issue
environments where
since
we
discs
each
were
want enough
used back in
textures and models
PS1.
to fill memory.
Yeah.
Which
We
you can
forget
do as
about
long
it,
as you
like
have a
how
long staircase or
the
an
same load
elevator
times
ride or a
consoles have
windy
always
corridor
had since
where you can
PS1.
ditch the old assets and then take 30 seconds or so to load the new assets. Having a 30-second elevator ride is a little extreme. More realistically, we'd probably chop the world into a number of smaller pieces and then do some calculations with sight lines and run speeds like we did for Haven City when we were making Jack 2. The game is 20 years old, but not much has changed since then. All those twisty passages are there for a reason. There's a whole subset of level design dedicated to this sort of work.
Really?
But
I
still,
didn't.
it's a
That's
giant
funny.
distraction for a team that just wants to make their game. So when I talked about the dream of an SSD, part of the reason for that 5 gigabyte a second target was to eliminate loads, but also part of the reason for that target was streaming. As in, what if the SSD is so fast
That would
as the player
remove
is
a
turning
very
on,
big problem
it's
that
possible
happens
to load
still in a
textures
lot of
from
Unreal
everything
games.
behind the player.
Oh,
Texture
yeah.
loading is one of the largest
If you
issues that
figure
happens in
it
gaming
takes
to
half a
date.
second to turn,
Yeah.
that's 4 gigabytes of compressed data you can load. That sounds about right for next gen.
Even on
Anyway,
like
back to
PC
the
games, the
hard drive.
difference you
Another
notice
strategy
between
for increasing
load times
effective
is the
read speed
hitching
to make
for
big
loading
sequential
textures.
chunks of data.
Yeah.
For example, we might group all the data together for each city block. That removes most of the seeds.
Or the idea that
and the streaming gets
entire
faster. But there's a downside
downloads
too, which is
are
that
dedicated
frequently
to
used
high-res
data is
textures.
included in many
Yeah.
chunks
Like-
and therefore is on the hard drive many, many times. Marvel's Spider-Man uses this strategy, and though it works very well for increasing the streaming speed, there's a massive duplication as a result. Some of the objects like mailboxes or news racks are on the hard drive 400 times.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm describing here are things that cramp a creative director's style. Either level design gets a little bit boring in places, or the data is duplicated so many times that it no longer fits on the Blu-ray disc. And you end up with hard limits on the player's run speed or driving speed. The player can't go faster than the load speed from the hard drive.
Yeah.
And finally, I'm sure many of you have noticed that after a patch download, a PlayStation 4 will sometimes take a long time to install.
My brother has this issue. He'll download
That's
like
because
a
when just
gig
part
for
of the file
Fortnite,
has been
and then
changed,
it'll take
the new data
10,
can be
15 minutes
downloaded
to
pretty
actually
quickly.
update.
It's
After
one of
it's
the
done
downloading.
fucking
A
most
brand new file
egregious
has to be
problems with
constructed
Modern
that includes
Warfare.
the changed
Modern
version.
Warfare has
Otherwise,
upwards
every
of
change
20
will
to
add
30
a
gig
seed or
updates.
two.
And
Even
it's
so,
so
you can
bad.
occasionally see this happening on game titles. They start to hitch once they get patched enough. With an SSD, though, no seeks. So no need to make brand new files with the changes incorporated into them, which means no installs as you know them today. There's yet one more benefit, which is that system memory can be used much more efficiently. On PlayStation 4, game data on the hard drive feels very distant and difficult to use. By the time you realize you need a piece of data, it's much too late to go out and load it. So system memory has to contain all of the data that could be used in the next 30 seconds or so of gameplay. That means a lot of the 8 gigabytes of system memory is idle. It's just waiting there to be
Well, they're using it as
potentially
a
used.
Glenn, they're using
On
Spider-Man as
PlayStation
a
5, though,
way
the
to
SSD is very
basically
close
talk
to
about
being
how
like
fast
more
you can
RAM.
move through an
Typically,
environment.
it's fast enough that when
Because
you
you
realize you
can
need a piece of
really go
you
very
can just
fast in
load it from
Spider-Man.
the SSD
And it's an open
use
world
it.
environment.
There's
So the best
no
way
need
to
have lots of
utilize that
data
would be,
parked in
hey,
system
look at
memory
how
waiting
fast
to
Spider-Man can
potentially
go
be
and
used.
still load the entire
A
channel.
different way of saying that is that most of RAM is working on the game's behalf. This is one of the reasons that 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 feels right for PlayStation 5. The presence of the SSD reduces the need for a massive
I remember this gen, they
intergenerational
were
increase in
hesitant
size.
on doing
So
8 gigabytes
back to the
alone.
dream of the SSD.
So now for
Here's the
16
set
gigabytes,
targets.
that's crazy.
Boot the game in a second. No load
They had
screens.
felt 2 gigabytes was enough
Design freedom,
for
meaning
like
no twisted
ever.
passages or long
Nope.
corridors. More game on the disk.
Remember, there was a
more
lot
game
of
on the
Windows
SSD.
XP games
And
that
finally, those
still don't
patch
work with
installs
Windows
go
7
away.
and beyond because of
The
that.
reality, though, is that the SSD
Some, yeah.
is just
Because
one piece of the
it wasn't
puzzle. There's
designed with
a lot of
more
places
RAM
where
being
bottlenecks
available
can
ever.
occur in between the SSD and the game code that uses the data. You can see this on PlayStation 4. If I use an SSD with 10 times the speed of a standard hard drive, I probably see only double the loading speed, if that. For PlayStation 5, our goal was not just that the SSD itself be 100 times faster. It was that game loads and streaming would be 100 times faster. So every single potential bottleneck needed to be addressed. And there are a lot of them. Let's look at check-in and what happens when its overhead gets 100 times larger. Conceptually, check-in is a pretty simple process. Data is loaded into system memory from the hard drive or SSD. It's examined. A few values are tweaked to check it in, and then it's moved to its final location. At the SSD speeds we're talking about, that last part, moving the data, meaning copying it from one location to another, takes roughly an entire next-gen CPU core. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. If all the overheads get 100 times larger, that will cripple the frame rate as soon as the player moves, and that massive stream of data starts coming off the SSD. So to solve all of that, we built a lot of custom hardware, namely a custom flash controller and a number of custom units in our main chip. The flash controller in the SSD was designed for
Overwatch just
smooth
announced its new
and
hero.
bottleneck-free operation, but also
it's not
with games in
new.
mind. For example, there are
The one
6
they announced
levels
2
of
years
priority
ago.
when reading from
Yeah.
the SSD. Priority is very important. You can imagine the player heading into some new location in the world and the game requesting a few gigabytes of textures. And while those textures are being loaded, an enemy is shot and has to speak a few dying words. Having multiple priority levels lets the audio for those dying words get loaded immediately. On one side, that flash controller connects to the actual flash dies that supply the storage. To reach our bandwidth target of 5 gigabytes a second, we ended up with a 12-channel interface. 8 channels wouldn't be enough. The resulting bandwidth we've achieved is actually 5.5 gigabytes a second. With a 12-channel interface, the most natural size that emerges for an SSD is 825 gigabytes. The key question for us was, is that enough? It's tempting to add more, but Flash certainly doesn't come cheap.
Because that
and
means we don't have to pay an arm and a leg for a console.
To be cost-effective with regards to what we put in the console. Ultimately, we resolved this question by looking at the play patterns of a broad range of gamers. We examined the specific games that they were playing over the course of a weekend or a week or a month, and whether that set of games would fit properly on the SSD. We were able to establish that the friction caused by reinstalls or redownloads would be quite low. And so we locked in on that 825 gigabyte size, while also preparing multiple strategies so that those who want more storage can add it. I'll go through the details in a moment. Back to the flash controller. On the other side, it connects to our main custom chip via 4 lanes of Gen 4 PCIe. And inside the main custom chip is a pretty hefty unit dedicated to I/O. Before we talk about what that does, let's talk compression for a moment. PlayStation 4 used zlib as its compression format. We decided to use it again on
I believe PlayStation got a hold of Sea
on my
of Thieves.
2017 tour of developers, I learned about a new format called Kraken from Rad Game Tools. It's like zlib's smarter cousin. Simple, similar types of algorithms, but about 10% better compression, which is pretty big.
Dude on the left's
that means
picking his
10%
nose.
more game on the UHD Blu-ray disc or on the SSD. Kraken had only been out for a year, but it was already becoming a de facto industry standard. Half of the teams I talked to were either using it or getting ready to evaluate it. So we hustled and built a custom decompressor into the I/O unit, one capable of handling over 5 gigabytes of Kraken format input data a second. After decompression, that typically becomes 8 or 9 gigabytes, but the unit itself is capable of outputting as much as 22 gigabytes a second if the data happen to compress particularly well. By the way, in terms of performance, that custom decompressor equates to 9 of our Zen 2 cores. That's what it would take to decompress the Kraken stream with a conventional CPU. There's a lot more in the custom I/O unit, including a dedicated DMA controller. The game can direct exactly where it wants to send the data coming off of the SSD. This equates to another Zen 2 core or 2 in terms of its copy performance. Its primary purpose is to remove check-in as a bottleneck. There's 2 dedicated I/O coprocessors.
So they are absolutely working on getting games to be smaller,
They're
and
principally
yet
to direct the
having
variety of
that
custom
data be
hardware
accessible
around them.
faster
One of
or
the
as
coprocessors is
fast as
dedicated
it was
to
before.
SSD I/O. This lets us bypass traditional file I/O and its bottlenecks when reading from the SSD.
Which is exactly what we
The
needed.
other is responsible
Exactly
for
what we
memory
wanted.
mapping, which
Yeah.
I know doesn't sound like anything related to the SSD, but a lot of
Oh, it's a
developers
52-minute
map and
video,
remap
Have.
memory as
They're
part
going to
of
be
the
here a
file
while.
I/O, and this too can become a bottleneck. There are coherency engines to assist the coprocessors. Coherency comes up a lot in places. Probably the biggest coherency issue is stale data in the GPU caches.
They're only talking about hardware
Flushing
today,
all of the
so...
GPU caches whenever the SSD is read is an unattractive option. It could really hurt the GPU performance. So we've implemented a gentler way.
Well, this
of
is
doing
interesting
things,
for a lot
where
of
the
the gaming
engines
audience,
inform the
including
GPU
for me.
of the
I like
overwritten
this.
address
This
ranges
is definitely
and
more
custom
for
scrubbers in several dozen GPU
the
caches
business
to
side.
pinpoint
Well, yeah, this
predictions
was their
of just
GDC
those
conference.
address ranges. The
Yeah.
best
This
thing
was
is, as a game
probably,
developer,
like,
when you
literally
meet with
filmed the
SSD, you don't need
practice.
to know any of this. You don't even need to know that your data is compressed. You just indicate what data you'd like to read from your original uncompressed file and where you'd like to put it, and the whole process of loading it happens invisibly to you and at very high speed. Back to the dream. Thanks to all of that surrounding hardware, our 5.5 gigabytes a second really should translate into something like 100 times faster I/O than PS4 and allow the dream of no load screens and super fast streaming to become a reality. Having said that, expandability of our SSD is going to be quite important. Flash is costly, and you may very well want to add storage to whatever we put in the console. Now, the kind of storage you need depends on how you're going to use it. If you have an extensive PlayStation 4 library
I
and
was
you'd
about
like
to
to take
ask,
advantage of
obviously
backwards
externals,
compatibility
but
to
I
play
wouldn't be
those games
surprised
on
if they made the
PlayStation 5,
console a bit bigger
then
and
a
fit in an
large external hard drive is
HDD
ideal.
inside with the
You can
SSD.
leave your games on the hard
Yeah.
drive and play
Just
them
held
directly
2
from
hard
there,
drives.
thus saving the pricier SSD storage for your PlayStation 5 titles, or you can copy your active PlayStation 4 titles to the
And
SSD.
I was going to say, the
If your
Xbox,
purpose in
the
adding
new
more
one
storage is
has
to play
proprietary
PlayStation 5
expanded
titles,
storage,
though,
and I don't like that.
ideally you would add to your SSD storage. We will be supporting certain M2 SSDs. These are internal drives that you can get on the open market and install in a bay in the PlayStation 5.
So I like
As for
this
which
more.
ones we support and when, I'll get to that in a moment. They connect through the custom I/O unit just like our SSD does. So they can take full advantage of the decompression, I/O coprocessors, and all the other features I was talking about. Here's the catch, though. That commercial drive has to be at least as fast as ours. Games that rely on the speed
Knowing
of our
Sony, they'll
SSD
do the
need to
same.
work
They literally
flawlessly
just
with
explained that they
M2.
are not doing the same.
When I gave the Wired interview,
So this
last
also
year, I said
means
that
that
the
in order
PlayStation
to
5 SSD
use
is faster
SSDs
than
that don't
anything
catch up to
available on
this,
PC. At the time,
Sony is going to
commercial
corner the
M2
market
drives
and
used
sell a
PCIe
premium
3.0,
on these
and 4
SSDs.
lanes of that cap out
Yeah.
at 3.5
Isn't that
gigabytes a
what
second. In other
similar
words,
idea of what they did with
no
the Vita, where you
PCIe
had to buy their
3.0
specific
drive can hit the required spec. M2
Possible,
drives
drive
with
space,
PCIe
whatever it was.
4.0 are now out in the market.
Well, that
We're
was
getting
still
our
that was
games
still
out in samples
entirely
and seeing
proprietary for
4 or
Vita.
5 gigabytes a second.
Oh, okay.
By year's
That was
end, I
100%
expect there will be
proprietary.
drives
There was
that
no
saturate
alternative.
4.0 and support 7 gigabytes a second. Having said that, we are comparing apples and oranges, though, because that commercial M2 drive will have its own architecture, its own flash controller, and so on. For example, the NVMe specification lays out a priority scheme for requests that the M2 drives can use. And that scheme is pretty nice, but it only has 2 true priority levels.
Oh,
Our
M2 is
drives
just the
support
sticks?
6.
Yeah, those
You
are
can hook up a drive
those are
with only 2
replacing the
priority
regular
levels, definitely,
SSDs
but
as
our
we know them.
custom I/O unit has to arbitrate the
Yeah.
extra priorities rather than the M2 drive's flash controller. And so the M2 drive needs a little extra speed to take care of issues arising from the different approach. That commercial drive also needs to physically fit inside of the bay we created in PlayStation 5 for M2 drives. Unlike internal hard drives, there's unfortunately no standard for the height of an M2 drive, and some M2 drives have giant heat sinks. In fact, some of them even have their own fans.
Really?
Right now, we're getting M2 drive samples and benchmarking.
It's
in
really
various
silly.
ways. When games
We
hit
still don't have
beta
that
as they
figured
get
out
ready
yet.
for the PlayStation 5 launch at year-end,
When are my
we'll also
RAM
be
sticks
doing some
getting individual
compatibility
fans?
testing to make sure that the architecture of
Oh, no.
particular M2 drives isn't too foreign for the games to handle. Once we've done that compatibility testing, we should be able to start letting you know which drives will physically fit and which drive samples have benchmarked appropriately high in our testing. It would be great if that happened by launch, but it's likely to be a bit past it. So please hold off on getting that M2 drive until you hear from us. Okay, back to our principles. Balancing evolution and revolution is the second of them. This was definitely a recurring theme with the GPU. We need new GPU features and capabilities. If we only have more performance, it's not really a new generation of console. Of course, many of these capabilities result in more performance. That's part of why a PlayStation 5 teraflop is more powerful than a PlayStation 4 teraflop. But we aren't just looking for the performance. We also need the ability to do something with the GPU that could not have been done before. And we need higher performance per watt. Every time we double the performance of some GPU component, we don't want to find out we've doubled the power consumed and the heat produced. But at the same time, we have to make sure the GPU can run PS4 games, and we have to ensure that the architecture is easy for the developers to adopt. Now, backwards compatibility was handled masterfully by AMD. They treated it as a key need throughout the design process. As our solution to adding new features without blindsiding developers, we made sure that if there were new significant features, it would be optional to use them. The GPU supports ray tracing, but you don't have to use ray tracing to make your game. The GPU supports primitive shaders, but you can release your first game on PlayStation 5 without making any use of them. Before I get into the capabilities of the GPU, I'd like to make clear 2 points that can be quite confusing. First, we have a custom AMD GPU based on their RDNA 2 technology. What does that mean? AMD is continuously improving and revising their tech. For RDNA 2, their goals were, roughly speaking, to reduce power consumption by re-architecting
I only
the
know
GPU
about
to
this
put
from
data close to where
bullshit
it's
console
needed,
wars on
to
Twitter. I hate it.
optimize the GPU for performance, and to add a new, more advanced feature set. But that feature set is malleable, which is to say that we have our own needs for PlayStation, and that can factor into what the AMD roadmap becomes. So collaboration is born. If we bring concepts to AMD that are felt to be widely useful, then they can be adopted into RDNA 2 and used broadly, including in PC GPUs. If the ideas are sufficiently specific to what we're trying to accomplish, like the GPU cache scrubbers I was talking about, then they end up being just for us. If you see a similar discrete GPU available as a PC card at roughly the same time as we release our console, that means our collaboration with AMD succeeded in producing technology useful in both worlds. It doesn't mean that we as Sony simply incorporated the PC part into our console.
Remove the
This
teraflop.
continuous improvement in AMD technology
2020
means it's dangerous to
coronavirus
rely
to
on
teraflop.
as an absolute indicator of performance, and CU count should be avoided as well. In the case of CPUs, we all understand this. The PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 each have 8 CPUs, but we never think that meant the capabilities and performance are equal. It's the same for CUs. For one thing, they've been getting much larger over time. Adding new features means adding lots of transistors. In fact, the transistor count for a PlayStation 5 CU is 62% larger than the transistor count for a PlayStation 4 CU. Second, the PlayStation 5 GPU is backwards compatible with PlayStation 4. What does that mean? One way you can achieve backwards compatibility is to put the previous console's chipset in the new console, like we did with some PlayStation 3s, but that's of course extremely expensive. A better way is to incorporate any differences in the previous console's logic
Okay,
into
that's what
the
they
new
got called
console's custom
Pro
chip.
Legacy,
Meaning
Legacy
that
mode.
even as the technology evolves, the logic and feature set that PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro titles rely on is still available in backwards
Well, can we go a little
compatibility
further?
modes. One advantage
back?
of this
I was
strategy
waiting
is
for
that
more to
once
appear
backwards
under the
compatibility is
PS4.
in the console, it's in.
Oh.
It's not as if a cost down will remove backwards compatibility like it did on PlayStation 3. Achieving this unification of functionality took years of efforts by AMD, as any roadmap advancement creates a potential divergence in logic.
So it
Running
is
PS4 and
boosting. It
PS4
isn't just
titles at
making it
boosted
backwards compatible.
frequencies
It
has
is
also added
absolutely making
complexity.
it so they
The
play
boost
better.
is truly massive this time around, and some
If it
game
took
code
years
can't
just to do
handle it.
PS4 to
Testing has to be
PS5,
done
then
on a
I can understand that.
title-by-title basis. Results are excellent, though. We recently took a look at the top 100
Almost all
PlayStation
of
4
them?
titles as ranked by playtime, and we're expecting almost all of them to be playable
Launch.
at
That doesn't
launch
mean that
on
the others
PlayStation
won't
5.
show up soon after.
I
With
remember it was
regards
like
to
that
new
when
features,
Xbox
as I
to
said,
Xbox
our
360
strategy was to
only
try to
select
break new
titles
ground, but at
could
the
be played
same
on
time
360.
not to require use of the new GPU capabilities. For more than a decade, GPUs have imposed a restriction on game engines.
Longest Final
Software
Fantasy
handles
VII's on
vertex
there.
processing, but for the most
Oh, yeah,
part,
that'll be fine.
dedicated hardware is responsible for the triangles and other geometry that the vertices form. That means it's not possible to do even basic optimizations, such as aborting processing of a vertex if all geometry that uses it is off-screen. PlayStation 5 has a new unit called the Geometry Engine, which brings handling of triangles and other primitives under full programmatic control. As a game developer, you're free to ignore its existence and use the PlayStation 5 GPU as if it were no more capable than the PS4 GPU, or you can use this new intelligence in various ways. Simple usage could be performance optimization, such as removing backfaced or off-screen vertices and triangles. More complex usage involves something called primitive shaders, which allow the game to synthesize geometry on the fly as it's being rendered. It's a brand new capability. Using primitive shaders on PlayStation 5 will allow for a broad variety of techniques, including smoothly varying
Procedural
level of detail, addition of procedural detail to close-up objects, and improvements to particle effects and other visual special effects.
If it's
Another
new, why'd they call it
major new
primitive?
feature of our custom RDNA 2-based GPU is ray tracing, using the same strategy as AMD's upcoming PC GPUs. The CUs contain a new specialized unit called the intersection engine, which can calculate the intersection of rays with boxes and triangles. To use the intersection engine, first you build what is called an acceleration structure. It's data in RAM that contains all of your geometry. There's a specific set of formats you can use. They're variations on the same BVH
All right, it can
concept.
also mean simple or
Then,
basic.
in your shader program, you use a
Fair.
new instruction that asks the intersection engine to check a ray against the BVH. While the intersection engine is processing the requested ray triangle or ray box intersections, the shaders are free to do other work. Having said that, the ray tracing instruction is pretty memory intensive, so it's a good mix with logic-heavy code. There's of course no need to use ray tracing. PS4 graphics engines will run just fine on PlayStation 5, but it presents an opportunity for those interested. I'm thinking it'll take less than 1 million rays a second to have a big impact on audio. That should be enough for audio occlusion and some reverb calculations. With a bit more of the GPU invested in ray tracing, it should be possible to do some very nice global illumination. Having said that, adding ray-traced shadows and reflections to a traditional graphics engine could easily take hundreds of millions of rays a second, and full ray tracing could take billions. How far can we go? I'm starting to get quite bullish. I've already seen a PlayStation 5 title that's successfully
Maybe he's talking
using
about
ray
Godfall.
tracing-based reflections in complex animated scenes with only modest costs. Another set of issues for the GPU involved
yeah.
size and frequency. How big do we make the GPU, and what frequency do we run it at? This is a balancing act. The chip has a cost, and there's a cost for whatever we use to supply that chip with power and to cool it. In general, I like running the GPU at higher frequency. Let me show you why. Here's 2 possible configurations for a GPU roughly of the level of the PlayStation 4 Pro. This is a thought experiment. Don't take these configurations too seriously. If you just calculate teraflops, you get the same number. But actually, the performance is noticeably different because teraflops is defined as the computational capability of the vector ALU. That's just one part of the GPU. There are a lot of other units. And those other units all run faster when the GPU frequency is higher. At 33% higher frequency, rasterization goes 33% faster. Processing the command buffer goes that much faster. The L2 and other caches have that much higher bandwidth, and so on. About the only downside is that system memory is 33% further away in terms of cycles. But the large number of benefits more than counterbalance that. As a friend of mine says, a rising tide lifts all boats. Also, it's easier to fully use 36 CUs in parallel than it is to fully use 48 CUs. When triangles are small, it's much harder to fill all those CUs with useful work. So there's a lot to be said for faster, assuming you can handle the resulting power and heat issues, which frankly, we haven't always done the best job at. Part of the reason for that is, historically, our process for setting CPU and GPU frequencies has relied on some heavy-duty guesswork with regards to how much electrical power games will consume and how much heat will be produced as a result inside of the console. Power consumption varies a lot from game to game. When I play God of War on my PS4 Pro, I know the power consumption is high just by the fan noise. But power isn't simply about engine quality. It's about the minutiae of what's being displayed and how. It's counterintuitive, but processing dense geometry typically consumes less power than processing simple geometry, which is, I suspect, why Horizon's map screen, with its low triangle count, makes my PS4 Pro heat up so much. Our process on previous consoles has been to try to guess what the maximum power consumption during the entire console lifetime might be, which is to say, the worst case scene in the worst case game, and prepare a cooling solution that we think will be quiet at that power level. If we get it right, fan noise is minimal. If we get it wrong, the console will be quite loud for the higher power games, and there's even a chance that it might overheat and shut down if we misestimate power too badly. PlayStation 5 is especially challenging because the CPU supports 256-bit native instructions that consume a lot of power. These are great here and there, but presumably only minimally used. Or are they? If we plan for major 256-bit instruction usage, we need to set the CPU clock substantially lower or noticeably increase the size of the power supply and fan. So, after much discussion, we decided to go with a very different direction on PlayStation 5. We built a GPU with 36 CUs. Mind you, RDNA 2 CUs are large. Each has 62% more transistors than the CUs we were using on PlayStation 4. So if we compare transistor counts, 36 RDNA 2 CUs equates to roughly 58 PlayStation 4 CUs. It is a fairly sizable GPU. Then we went with a variable frequency strategy for PlayStation
I don't want to
5,
manage water cooling on a
we
console.
continuously run the GPU and CPU in boost mode. We supply a generous amount of electrical power and then increase the frequency of GPU and CPU until they reach the capabilities of the system's cooling solution. It's a completely different paradigm. Rather than running at constant frequency and
So
letting
in
power
layman's
vary based on
terms,
the workload, we run
it's your
at essentially
laptop on
constant
power mode
and let the
at all
frequency
times.
vary based on the workload.
Yeah.
We then tackled the engineering challenge of a cost-effective
your Prius in power mode.
performance cooling solution
Yep.
designed for that specific power level.
Prius.
In some ways, it becomes a simpler
What? It has a
problem
power
because there
mode.
are no more unknowns. There's no need to guess what power consumption the worst-case game might have. As for the details of the cooling solution, we're saving them for our teardown. I think you'll be quite happy with what the engineering team came up with. So, how fast can we run the GPU and CPU with this strategy? The simplest approach would be to look at the actual temperature of the silicon die and throttle the frequency on that basis. But that won't work. It fails to create a consistent PlayStation 5 experience. It wouldn't do to run a console slower simply because it was in a hot room. So rather than look at the actual temperature of the silicon die, we look at the activities that the GPU and CPU are performing and set the frequencies on that basis, which makes everything deterministic and repeatable. While we're at it, we also use AMD's Smart Shift technology and send any unused power from the CPU to the GPU so it can squeeze out a few more pixels. The benefits of this strategy are quite large. Running a GPU at 2 gigahertz was looking like an unreachable target with the old fixed frequency strategy. With this new paradigm, we're able to run way over that. In fact, we have to cap the GPU frequency at 2.23 gigahertz so that we can guarantee that the on-chip logic operates properly. 36 CUs at 2.23 gigahertz is 10.3 teraflops, and we expect the GPU to spend most of its time at or close to that frequency and performance. Similarly, running the CPU at 3 gigahertz was causing headaches with the old strategy. But now we can run it as high as 3.5 gigahertz. In fact, it spends most of its time at that frequency. That doesn't mean all games will be running at 2.23 gigahertz and 3.5 gigahertz. When that worst-case game arrives, it will run at a lower clock speed, but not too much lower. To reduce power by 10%, it only takes a couple of percent reduction in frequency, so I'd expect any downclocking to be pretty minor. All things considered, the change to a variable frequency approach will show significant gains for PlayStation gamers. The final of our 3 principles was about finding new dreams. It's important for us on the hardware team to find new ways to expand or deepen gaming, and that's what led us to a focus on 3D audio. As players, we experience the game through the visuals, through audio, and through the feedback we receive from the controller, such as rumble or haptics. Personally, I feel a game is just dead without audio. Visuals are, of course, important, but the impact of audio is huge as well. At the same time, the audio team on a game project has to do a lot with a little. For example, on PlayStation 4, there's fierce competition for the Jaguar CPU cores. Audio typically ends up getting just a fraction of a core. That's not much of a computational resource, particularly when you consider that the visuals run at 30 or 60 frames a second, but audio processing needs to happen at almost 200 times a second. So it's been tough going making forward progress on audio with PlayStation 4, particularly when PlayStation 3 was such a beast when it came to audio. The SPUs in Cell were almost a perfect device for audio rendering. Simple pipelined algorithms could really take advantage of asynchronous DMA and frequently reached 100% utilization of the floating point unit. There's unfortunately nothing comparable on PlayStation 4. Probably the most dramatic progress in the PlayStation 4 generation has been with virtual reality. The PSVR hardware has its own audio unit. It supports about 50 pretty decent 3D sound sources. And this provided a hint as to where we could go with audio, as well as some valuable experience. Not to oversimplify, but here were our goals for audio on PlayStation 5. The first goal was great audio for everyone, not just VR users or soundbar owners or headphone users. That meant audio had to be part of the console. It couldn't be a peripheral. The second goal was to support hundreds of sound sources. We didn't want developers to have to pick and choose what sounds would get 3D effects and which wouldn't. We wanted every sound in the game to have dimensionality. And finally, we wanted to really take on the challenges of presence and locality. Now, when we say presence, we mean the feeling that you're actually there. You've entered the matrix. It's not, of course, something we thought we could perfectly achieve, but the idea was that if we stopped using just a rain sound and instead used lots of 3D audio sources for raindrops hitting the ground at all sorts of locations around you, then at some point your brain would take a leap and you'd begin to have this feeling of real presence inside the virtual world of the game. This has the capacity
Did he say
to
binaural?
affect your appreciation of the game,
Well, that's what he's
just like
talking about.
music in a game does. The concept of locality is simpler. It's just your sense of where the audio is coming from, to the right of you, behind you, above you. This can immerse you further in the game, and it can also directly enhance the gameplay. To use Dead Space as an example, I know, old school, you're fighting enemies in fairly dark, spooky locations. Back in the day, if you played the game using the TV speakers, you could tell that there was one last enemy growling and hunting you down, but it was difficult to tell quite where that enemy was. With headphones, you could tell that the enemy was somewhere on the right, which let you deduce, if you couldn't see it, that it must be somewhere behind and to your right. But with 3D audio with good locality, the idea is you know the enemy is precisely there, and you turn and you take it out. So, how do we know where a sound is coming from in the first place? Well, all those bumps and folds in the ear have a meaning, evolutionarily speaking. Based on what direction the sound is coming from, sound waves bounce around inside the ear, there's some constructive and destructive interference, and the result is a change in volume. The phase of the sound also shifts, depending on what path the sound wave took to reach the ear canal. These volume changes and phase shifts are different for each direction and also vary depending on the frequency of the sound. Head size and head shape also impact the sound in a similar fashion. The way that the sound changes, based on direction and frequency, can be encoded in a table called the Head-Related Transfer Function, or HRTF. Here's part of one. The vertical axis is the frequency. The horizontal axis is the direction, front, back, left, right, and the color gives the
Game developers that
degree of
focus on
attenuation of the
audio
sound
are
at that
feasting
frequency.
right now on getting some
The
attention.
HRTF is as unique
Or
to
game
an individual
developers
as
are
a
going to
fingerprint
nut.
is. In fact, you're looking at mine right now. Here's how we measure an HRTF. We've taken hundreds of people through this process. We put a microphone in the subject's left and right ear canals, and then sit the subject down in the middle of an array of 22 speakers. We then play an audio sweep from each speaker as we rotate the subject. In the course of 10 or 20 minutes, we're able to sample the HRTF at over 1,000 locations.
Imagine just saying
Using
that
an
things
HRTF when rendering audio
and
creates
spinning for 20 minutes
unparalleled
listening to
quality,
random
but it's
sounds.
computationally expensive.
I had to go crazy.
The simplest way to use an
In a room like
HRTF
that,
is to
too.
process a sound source to
In a
make
room
it
like
appear as
that,
if it's
too.
coming from one of those 1,000 locations we sample. Unfortunately, the processing has to be done in frequency domain rather than time domain, so there's multiple fast Fourier transforms needed for every sound source, for every audio.
Yeah,
type.
find a
That's
binaural
a
audio
lot
video
of
on
multipliers.
YouTube. It's
This
unsettling if you close
computational
your eyes and just
complexity was
listen
the
to it.
determining factor for our strategy.
Well, that's
It
what
meant we had to
ASMR is
bite
based
the
off
Yeah,
bullet
of.
and
yeah.
design and build a
I
custom
mean, like
hardware unit for
before
3D
ASMR,
audio.
like someone wrapping
Collectively, we refer to the
plastic shrink
hardware
wrap
unit
around
and
your
the
head.
proprietary algorithms we run on it. Tempest
Yes.
3D audio tech. The meaning of 3D audio and technology should be pretty obvious here. As for Tempest, I feel it really reflects our goals with audio. It suggests a certain intensity of experience and also hints at your presence within it. We're calling the hardware unit that we built the Tempest engine. It's based on AMD's GPU technology. We modified a compute unit in such a way as to make it very close to the SPUs in PlayStation 3. Remember when I said that they were ideal for audio? So the Tempest engine has no caches, just like an SPU. All data access is via DMA, just like an SPU. Our target was that it would have more power than a CPU, thanks to the parallelism that a GPU can achieve, and that it would be more efficient than our GPU, thanks to the SPU-like architecture. The goal being to make possible near 100% utilization of the CU's vector units. Where we ended up is a unit with roughly the same SIMD power and bandwidth as all 8 Jaguar cores in the PlayStation 4 combined. If we were to use the same algorithms as PSVR, that's enough for something like 5,000 sound sources. But of course, we want to use more complex algorithms, and we don't need anything like that number of sounds. It would have been wonderful if a simpler strategy, such as using Dolby Atmos peripherals, could have achieved our goals, but we wanted 3D audio for all, not just those with licensed soundbars or the like. Also, we wanted many hundreds of sound sources, not just the 32 that Atmos supports. And finally, we wanted to be able to throw an overwhelming amount of processing power at the problem, and it wasn't clear what any peripheral might have inside of it. In fact, with the Tempest engine, we've even got enough power that we can allocate some to the games, to the extent that games want to make use of convolution reverb and other algorithms that are either computationally expensive or need high bandwidth. But the primary purpose of the Tempest engine remains 3D audio. Now, 3D audio is a major academic research topic. It's safe to say that no one in the world has all of the answers. And the set of algorithms that has to be invented, tuned, or implemented to realize our vision for 3D audio is immense. For example, use of HRTFs in games is quite complex. Before, I talked about making a sound source appear as if it's coming from one of those 1,000 HRTF sample locations. But for high-quality 3D game audio, we have to handle other possibilities. The sound source might not be at one of the 1,000 HRTF sample locations, so we have to blend the HRTF data from the closest locations that we have sampled. The sound source might be moving, which needs very special handling as that blend keeps changing, and that can cause phase artifacts in the resulting audio. Or the sound source might have a size to it, meaning it should feel as if it's coming from an area rather than a single point. There's also whole categories of approaches to be handled. 3D audio can be implemented using individual processing of 3D sound sources. But alternatively, ambisonics can be used for 3D audio. Ambisonics being somewhat like the spherical harmonics used in computer graphics. And finally, there's audio devices. The player might be using headphones or TV speakers or have a higher-end surround sound setup with 6 or more speakers, all of which need different approaches. That's a lot of variations. It's nice to have the computational resources of the Tempest engine, but it's clear that achieving our ultimate goals with 3D audio is going to be a multi-year, step-by-step process. Having said that, headphone audio implementation is largely complete at this time. It was a natural place for us to start. With headphones, we control exactly what each ear hears, and therefore the algorithmic development and implementation are more straightforward. For TV speakers and stereo speakers, we're in the process of implementing virtual surround sound. The idea being that if you're sitting in a sweet spot in front of the TV, then the sound can be made to feel as if it's coming from any direction, even behind you. Virtual surround sound has a lot in common with 3D audio on headphones, but it's more complex because the left ear can hear the right speaker and vice versa. We have a basic implementation of virtual surround sound up and running. We're now looking at increasing the size of that sweet spot, which is to say, making the area you need to be in to feel the 3D effect larger, and we're also working to boost the sense of locality. Headphone audio is the current gold standard for 3D audio on PlayStation 5, but we're going to see what we can do to bring virtual surround sound to a similar level, after which we'll start in on setups with more speakers, such as 6-channel surround sound. It's now to the point where some of the PlayStation 5 games in development are extensively using these systems. One of the game demos allows you to toggle between conventional PlayStation 4-style stereo audio and our new 3D audio. I listened with just an ordinary pair of over-the-ear headphones, and wow, I could feel a difference. 3D audio has that dimensional feel to it. Conventional stereo audio feels smashed flat by comparison. The improvement is obvious. So, a big advancement.
And that's not even like anything you need an
HDR-enabled
HDR-enabled TV or anything like that to hear it. You can just go on YouTube and you'll find it.
Our target of presence. Well, the answer is no. But you've probably caught on to what's missing here, namely whose HRTF was being used. It wasn't mine, it was the default HRTF. The audio team analyzed the hundreds that they measured and chose the one they felt was the closest fit to the total game playing audience. This shows a piece of the default HRTF on the left and my HRTF on the right.
Jesus,
you can see that
okay.
the general features are much the same, but the details are quite different.
Well,
With
we're not
HRTF,
his doctors. I don't think we can
3D
see
audio
this.
Sounds pretty great. When I use my HRTF, though, the audio reaches a higher level of realism, which is to say that when using headphones and my HRTF, I occasionally get fooled and even think a sound is coming from the real world when it's actually coming from the game. A corollary to this is that there are a few people whose HRTFs are sufficiently far from the default HRTF, that's the red dot here, that they can toggle between PS4 style and PS5 style audio and not sense much difference. I've had a few people describe the PlayStation 5's 3D audio as sounding like a bit better stereo audio. Presumably they're the ones at the very edges of this diagram.
They insulted Cerny's audio, so Cerny's insulting them.
I'd like everyone to be able to
Your
experience
ears are
what I'm
too basic,
experiencing,
sorry.
but obviously, it's not
You're at
possible
the edge of
to
this
measure
graph,
the
bitch.
HRTF of every PlayStation user.
You're an outlier.
That means HRTF selection and synthesis are going to be big topics going forward as the Tempest technology matures. At PlayStation 5 launch, we'll be offering a choice of 5 HRTFs. There's a simple test where you pick the one that gives you the best locality.
Oh, sick.
That's just the first step, though. This is an open-ended research topic.
I thought he was really going to leave it
You'll be
at,
sending
yeah, if you're
us a
not
photo
default,
of
you're
your ear,
fucked.
And we'll
Sorry.
choose a neural network
No, that's
to be
cool.
the closest HRTF in our library. Maybe you'll be sending us a video of your ears and your head, and we'll make a 3D model of them and synthesize the HRTF.
I'm
Maybe
tweeting
you'll play
that at
an
you
audio
right now.
loop to tune your HRTF. We'll be subtly changing it as you play and home in on the HRTF that gives you the highest score, meaning that it matches you the best. This is a journey we'll all be taking together over the next few years. Ultimately, we're committing to enabling everyone to experience that next level of realism. Hopefully, I've been able to illustrate a bit about our
CPU outside
design
of
and
when it's in
decision-making
conjunction with the
process today,
GPU.
and why PlayStation 5 has the feature set that it does. Now comes the fun part. We get to see how the development community takes advantage of that feature set. I'm hoping for the completely unexpected. Will it come from audio, ray tracing, the capabilities of the SSD, or something else? I guess we'll find out soon.
Okay.
Thank you for your time today.
So I think they maybe out of the gate should have set people's expectations to understand that this was a GDC conference that couldn't happen because GDC didn't happen. A lot of people didn't understand that this was supposed to be a GDC thing.
The minute they brought up Cerny's name, I thought people did expect.
Nope. Plenty of people have not. Nope. There was not going to be anything like have asked in our chat any news on actual GPU specs. They weren't interested in showing the specs. This is for developers. This was not for the average consumer to understand or to appeal to them at all. It was meant for developers and to be interested in them. And developers aren't going to care about the buzzwords of specs. They're going to care about how it functions and what it allows them to do.
From a design standpoint, not from a when the game's already complete and running standpoint.
But yeah, you were going to say, Phil?
So, just from what it seems like, there's a lot of what people have been going over, and right now, some of the bigger takeaways from it is that PS4 backwards compatibility for PS5 is not going to be 100% at launch. So that is kind of a shame, considering the fact that I think at this point we should already have the ability to go that far. We should have had the ability to do that. But it also seems like the way that we're looking at backwards compatibility, there's two different modes. So there's a pro mode and a legacy mode, and a traditional legacy mode. I don't know why that would be, because I feel like if you're going to just boost PS4 games across hardware like universally, it should just be this one. It's this one catch-all thing, as opposed to, well, this is going to run over Pro and this is going to run. That's the takeaway I got from that little graphic, was that it seems like there's going to be like 3 different modes of backwards compatibility.
Yeah.
And my understanding is like, why is that?
I mean, it's like, so it took. They were saying, he said it took them years to just figure that out for it, and I think it has something to do with like what Pop brought up and how XP games hardly work on modern systems, but it's because things like there's just more RAM, and even if it's limiting it, the old RAM was GDDR5, the new one is GDDR6, so there's still like, it isn't the same hardware, basically, so it's not going to be as seamless because it's upgraded, but it is not exactly the same.
Well, I'm kind of with Phil on, like, why is there 2 separate modes for PS4 and PS4 Pro? Wouldn't the Pro just be the default because it runs PS4?
We're gonna need clarification on that. That takeaway is literally, it looks like there's 2 separate PS4 modes.
Yeah, because there are like...
And I don't understand why they would have 2 separate ones is all. It's like,
well, because here's the thing.
Isn't
so
Pro the stronger console? What
but
differences are between the original and Pro that you'd want to choose the original?
Right, but remember, there's an entire library of games that don't benefit from the Pro. Bloodborne is one of those games that is considered a first-party title that doesn't benefit from the Pro. So
Watch Dogs 2 runs slower on it has choppier frame rates on PS4 Pro because you can only run it at the higher resolution of the PS4 Pro.
Right.
Oh, okay. So then there we go. That's the answer I was looking for then. Why
so
would they need to include such a mode?
Well, it seems like what's going to have to happen is they're going to have to what it feels like is they're going to boost the games to run better. But they're going to have to boost those games separately across the board, because there is a performance boost mode that is available on the PS4 Pro that does next to nothing. So
Yeah.
it's just so like you can't even see the actual the performance boost. In fact, for like Bloodborne's a really good barometer for that, because Bloodborne is easily one of the like worst running games in the console that requires so much more power than what the PS4 and the PS4 Pro are outputting to get those visuals running as fast as they need to be running at.
Yeah, and the good examples would be any games that have variable frame rates like Kingdom Hearts 3. When you turn super sampling on, it runs slower.
It runs slower, but if you turn it off and you get it to run at resolution. So the biggest problem right now is variable resolution, it feels like. So for the PS4 Pro, all it essentially does is uses checkerboarding with the super sampling to kind of up resolution, as it were, for like the PS4. And I think they were there's some I haven't seen the Digital Foundry stuff on the FF7 demo, but a good example of like that would be it seems like on the PS4 Pro natively the FF7 is running at 1440p as opposed to just a full-out 4K. But for other games, like the Pro will sometimes try to boost the resolution more so than it'll boost frame rate.
Yeah.
So I think
like Red Dead Redemption 2.
Right. So I think that going into this generation, it's going to be the opposite, or it's going to be in tandem. So what I got from all that CPU can offload stuff over to the GPU means that there's not going to be that problem where the system's going to choose one over the other, and you're going to lose on a performance every single time. They're going to try to make performance comparable and boost it across every version of every game. But that also means that you're talking about having to, with these two separate modes, it would make sense as to why they would need to not only separate it, but also not have the entire library available for everyone to play. Because the easiest option would be to create the PS4 Pro boost mode, because I think after when was it released? 2015, 2016? Whenever
Something
the Pro
like
was
that.
released.
Yeah.
After that point, games started. Remember, because there was that one really awkward year where games had to have Pro patches as opposed to just having Pro, because now every game has, like, there's an Xbox One X, there's a PS4 Pro. Now every game that utilizes that is just going to have those options available automatically, as before where you had to have games that either had Pro patches or didn't have Pro patches. A really good example would be Final Fantasy 15. 15 was probably one of the crazier update cycles patching cycles for a video game in like recent memory, because it went through so many different iterations. And the Pro patch, when it finally came out, introduced a variable frame rate that targeted 60 frames but never got there.
Yeah, definitely never got there.
PS4 Pro, it was always about pushing higher resolution, because 4K was the big buzzword of the last generation. 4K, 4K, 4K. And I think that they now have gotten to a point in which everyone's kind of beating them over the head. Every single upstart Digital Foundry and all these other tech channels that are doing side-by-side comparisons in terms of general performance, they're starting to realize gamers don't want resolution's fine. We love resolution. We love high resolutions. What we love more is fucking frame rate. We want to play the games at higher frame rates. So
especially when the jump from 480p to 1080p was much larger than 1080 to 2160, right? That's 4K.
The other thing is that I think we're now finally getting to a point in which 4K is becoming the norm.
Oh, 100%. It's the standard now, because they don't really make 1080p TVs anymore. The only ones they make are those really cheap. Well,
I was going to say that on when it comes to checkerboarding, sometimes it's not desirable, like in games like Red Dead Redemption 2, because if you have waving grass, which next generation will be able to render more of, it looks terrible when it's super sampled Red Dead Redemption 2, because the checkerboarding creates so many artifacts within anything that's moving.
All right.
Oh yeah, Horizon had that issue too. Horizon and Red Dead Redemption 2 on PS4 had that issue. PS4 Pro.
Exactly. So I think
if it was just a 1080p source, though, I believe the TV just upscaling the on-screen content, not the actual hardware doing it, the super sampling, looks pretty good on most 4K TVs now.
That adds input delay.
That's
Oh,
it. It's
does
always
it?
an input.
Yeah, because your
100%.
PC's
Every single time.
because your monitor's processing more.
Gotcha.
That's why, like, if that's the primary reason why you go from a CRT to a modern TV, it's because your modern TV does processing and processing the image. That's what creates input latency. It's hardly the hardware. It's the TV processing.
So we still haven't heard a whole. I mean, we've gotten a lot of small bits and pieces out of the Xbox One Series X that have basically confirmed that they're going to allow for support up to 120 frames per second. But that's just the allowal of it. It doesn't mean that every game is going to be able to hit those markers. It's just, now variable frame rate is going to be able to target higher frame rates other than 60, which is great. But it also, like, what I'm going back and trying to figure out is, okay, so they were prioritizing frame rate on the Xbox Series X, and for this one, it feels like the biggest takeaway is, especially with that whole callback to the level design and stuff like that, is, hey, we want to give. It's exactly what what I talked about earlier. It's like we want to give developers the ability to create massive, sprawling worlds, and to do so in a way that isn't going to require them to create cutoffs. So that okay. Take for example, a really good example would be if Final Fantasy VII. It's going to be PS4. Part 2 and Part 3 are going to be PS4. That's already been confirmed. But if they were to create a PS5 version of Final Fantasy VII Part 2, which is going to have the open world, you would be able to add far more of that world by comparison than you would be able to natively on the PS4 by sheer virtue of the fact that what they're trying to do within the hardware of the PS5 is to make a CPU that is rendering all of that, and it's still going to give developers the ability to make these entirely massive sprawling worlds without having to worry about adding loading checks and marker points and things like that, cutoffs, an actual open world as opposed to segmented or
I think
what's the actual
example,
word for it?
I don't know. It's fractured.
Not fractured. It's because it's like you refer to it, and it's like an MMO term, where it's like, is this MMO open world or is
sharding?
No,
maybe.
No,
No.
It's instance
server based.
Making instances. So it's moving away from instances and moving towards more. Not only being able to load those worlds up, but also to have those worlds be available to you for the player to basically not only run through, but run through very fast and not have to worry about the game hitching or loading, which happens in Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I think a good example of a game recently that basically just put their open world in different segments, but you can still fly around in those segments. It's the newest Dragon Ball game. They have like 10 different quote-unquote open worlds rather than just one open world.
It's instances, yeah. It's instance areas. It's what Destiny does. So the difference would be if let's take Destiny as a good example. Suddenly now the tower represents a part of the world. Like it's the Earth suddenly becomes an actual. You have the ability to make the tower a hub point and still have all of the things that are happening within that tower, and the new next generation hardware is going to allow for Destiny 3, if that is ever going to be a thing, to create an actual Earth open world map that like spans the actual entire region, including the tower.
Yeah, and
so
that's
the dream that they're going to try to allow developers the ability to do.
Because back then, with Final Fantasy VII Remake, that is an entire planet.
Right.
That is a entire round revolving world. Oh my God, you're gonna go from oh man, fly south from Mideel and end up in the Northern Crater.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that like I don't know if that's going to be something that's going to be used in Remake, because Square Enix has already confirmed that like they're not going to move away from PS4 development for a very long time.
Yeah, I'll have to wait and see on that.
we're definitely have to wait and see. I 100% believe that Part 3, if there's going to be a Part 3, they'll probably turn around and more will be like, what I want to do with Part 3 is going to necessitate PS5 architecture.
Yeah, they changed on that sometimes, so
yeah,
wouldn't be surprised by it.
Fine.
Yeah,
it would be fine because at that point the PS5 is already going to be backwards compatible, and you're already going to be able to play it, and they can just do the Kingdom Hearts thing and be like, buy the full edition for a limited price of $60 with all 3 games of which will at that point be clearing well over Persona 5 levels of content. So
yeah.
But that may not be for another 6, 7, 8 years.
I'd give it 6 years. I would give it 100%. Now,
they said they would be faster after this first part of the game's finished.
So. They said that there's no
slightly
promise.
Faster. They were hopeful. They were
hopeful for sure. They're optimistic that right now what they're attempting to do, now that because the biggest problem was trying to figure out what the remake is going to be. Right? Like, how are they going to make the remake even work in the first place? And now that we have a complete and utter understanding of that, that means that Part 2 is just not going to touch Midgar again at all. Because that means they're just going to make it so that Midgar is just something you see in the distance, and everything else is going to be playable at that point. Which, I mean, after playing Final Fantasy 15, you can make a very large and sprawling open world and still make it feel very big and lived in, but FF7's like, just by sheer virtue of what it is, it's a huge fucking game.
Yeah.
It's a huge fucking game. Even if it's mostly linear, it's a very big game. So it would benefit far more from PS5 architecture than it would for PS4, but business-wise, it's not going to really pan out, because then you're going to talk about, okay, not only do I have to buy into another part of the series, which at this point, I think that there's the fact that people like Angry Joe and there's so many other fucking people out there who don't understand why, like, there's something like, why can't I have the full game? It's like, you dumb, dense motherfucker. You don't understand what they're attempting to do, nor how much detail they're putting into the game right now, and to have that go across literally the entire game at that point, we wouldn't see the game until 2030. 100%. 100%. But going back to like what they could do for other games, what that also means to me is smaller games that are not necessarily about instances, but aren't open world games, like Resident Evils, God of Wars. They're gonna have fucking amazing looking games, because they're not going to require as much CPU, but they're going to be boosted like at all times. The GPU is going to be boosted at all times, and I think that what I was getting for that was Mark Sutton was saying it's going to allow the GPU to output like intense levels of power to just for games that aren't going to require that much processing within like an open world space. Those games are just going to, just by sheer virtue of that, going to end up looking 10 times better. So that's cool, but this is going to definitely be a situation where E3 is going to be, well, not E3, but E3 season, as we're going to call it from now on, is going to be the point where we actually learn about the Series X, the PS5, and get all those buzzwords out to the public and see what exactly. We might even learn about whether or not backwards compatibility is going to be. But I'm holding my breath on backwards compatibility for
further back than that.
Yeah, because from what they were saying, how they're gonna they need to utilize the logic of those consoles. It's like, yeah, no, that makes sense for the PS4. Imagine trying to install cell processor logic into a fucking computer now. Like,
oh yeah, for PS3, yeah.
Yeah, you could. We got a guy who's emulating it. There's a fantastic emulator of it right now.
But they don't want to do emulation.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what that would be like. I mean, they have the modern PS2 classics you can buy on PS3 are emulation, since the Emotion Engine is not inside the Emotion Engine being the PS2 chip. It's not inside the modern PS3s. So it's all emulated.
Right.
Same with like No, it's like different it's like a hybrid for PS Vita and PS3 for PS1 games.
PS2 was such a I mean, both PS1 and PS2 were so weird in their tech.
Yeah.
Because that's why we got the really strange or Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy VII theme song, or not theme songs. The whole OST for both of those games is so unique.
Yeah.
Because they were both utilizing the PS1 and PS2 soundboards respectively. So obviously from all that, basically what felt like the longest conversation to a point where I felt like I was blacking out for a second. The new audio thing sounds really cool because to allow actual binaural audio to be a thing within games would mean you are going to have an insane amount of detail when it comes to shooters. So now developers are going to have to take, for instance, Rainbow Six. You're going to be able to hear a motherfucker running above you, creaking the floorboards with every step he takes, and you're going to be able to actually track that and possibly turn around and start shooting up because of that. Or in a horror game, you have so many different layers of awful things you can do to a player with binaural audio, which would be amazing, but also only really works for surround sound systems and headphones. So it's cool that they're doing that. Definitely doesn't seem like it needed a 30-minute part of that, but I understand it's for the developers. So,
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to send ear picks to Cerny? Yeah, sure, 100%.
Yes, I'll deliver.
Exactly, and he's a good guy. He's a nice guy. He knows what he's talking about.
Everyone else has to pay for my ear picks, though.
Oh, 100%. They have to prove themselves worthy. No one's put that much work in to make my ears sound great. So, yeah, I think the major takeaway is that it definitely feels like they are moving towards what we wanted, which is smaller games, more detail, which is exactly what we needed in today's day and age. And they did also make a clear difference and said, hey, PS5 games should be put onto your SSD. But if you want to play PS4 games, absolutely only use an external hard drive. It doesn't make sense to do that because PS5 games are just not going to run the same off of an external hard drive. We need PS5 games to be installed natively on the PS5 for them to run as well as we want them to run.
Yeah.
On the Xbox right now, you can turn VSync off of Rainbow Six Siege and go above 60 frames per second if you have 120 hertz. Well, that's what I'm saying is that the Xbox is doing things. The Xbox is basically a mini computer at this point.
Do you have a fucking G-Sync monitor or FreeSync monitor?
I do not.
I don't like it. I actually don't like it because it creates artifacts, and not just VSync artifacts, but it goes horizontal too. It has it in Halo Master Chief Collection. I have to enable the in-game VSync because G-Sync doesn't cover it well enough. It's also a huge issue when I'm working in Premiere. Any videos you watch, you can't watch anything in full screen video. It's just tearing all over the place if it's a constantly moving image.
That's wild because I haven't had. I want to say I actually haven't had that many problems with screen tearing in anything I've played in recent memory.
Yeah, I haven't either. I didn't either until I left G-Sync on.
Yeah. Well, it's a fucking tower for God's sake. Yeah, 100%. 100%. But yeah, I don't know. I think at the end of the day, we are definitely going to be seeing a lot more information coming around E3 season. There's going to be a lot more people coming off and revealing their games. Like I said, I knew there was not going to be games today. It doesn't make sense for them to come out of nowhere, especially in the midst of a literal pandemic, and be like, "Look at all the PS5 shit." No, this was just a way for them to get to use.
Also March. I think anyone that was expecting game stuff today was going in with the wrong mindset.
Yeah.
I just don't think I just don't think people get it anymore. Like, people always go into these fucking things and they're always like, "Oh man, I can't do it. It's PS5 reveal." It's like, that's not what he said.
Right.
That's not what they said. They said that they're going to show that it's a deep dive of the system architecture. It's not the same thing as a reveal. A reveal would be, fucking showing up and they hand you out ponchos for the Microsoft Kinect and Cirque du Soleil shit, like all that kind of crazy shit. But that's not going to happen. We're literal pandemic levels right now, so there's a lot of shit that they're just gonna turn around and make small videos of, release it on the internet, and be, here you go, here's the consoles. My question is, and it's a strange thing to think about considering where we're at right now, but we're actually starting to see a lot of other entertainment industries follow suit in some ways. For instance, the movie industry, I think an NBC Universal is actually going to be releasing a lot of movies that have come out on theater to on-demand audiences for a premium, about $20 each. So you can rent those for about 48 hours and play those out. There are some other movies like the Fast and Furious movies that I am fast and very furious about are being outright delayed to next year entirely. So they're not even seeing the light of day.
Depending on the delay of the shooting for the next part, I imagine they want to make like the 2 parts, and then it's like only 6 months apart from.
Oh no, I 100% would. The only way I would be okay with this delay is if they turn around and say I get to watch 9 and 10 almost immediately, right after the other. You know what I mean?
Because you heard the rumor about it being like a 2-parter, right?
Yes, it is a 2-parter.
Yeah. Okay.
But what I'm thinking of now, having to consider all of this, is it possible we may actually see both consoles delayed simply because of the fact that this pandemic is affecting everyone so wildly, and we still don't know. Everything is very much up in the air about how long we're going to also be on quarantine from like across the world. Are we going to see a possible delay to beginning of next year, just to be safe? Just so the NPD doesn't fuck anybody.
It's too early to tell, because that would just be more because of production issues.
Right.
But I believe China's just starting to get back into normalcy, and I imagine that's where they're gonna produce the hardware, right?
China and Vietnam is where they're produced.
In Vietnam.
They moved them to
Vietnam is, then
like last year.
I'm thinking there probably won't be a delay on consoles, assuming it's gonna be, to begin with, holiday 2020. So I think November, December.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that they're gonna be fine unless something else pops up. I'm thinking they'll be fine.
Yeah. There's rumors of a house lockdown. That's called shelter in place, is what that means. It means if you live in a state or a county or anything like that, where your governor turns around and says, "Hey, you are not legally allowed. You are now on lockdown. If you are found outside, you will be handled with, litigation." So, hopefully, I think some places are already getting to that point. There's some rumors that Philadelphia is going to hit, or Pennsylvania is going to be like that, and California is already going through shelter in place. New York, I believe, just initiated some shelter in place in certain counties. There are just particular epicenters. Like, I wouldn't put it past the fact that Orlando is going to be up and running for a fucking shelter.
Oh yeah, because it should be like a county by county basis, because in most states, their largest cities are 90% of the population.
Right. And it's wild because we don't have a confirmed case in Orlando specifically, but someone's got it. Someone has it. We're right next to, we're like an hour away from Cape Canaveral, which is like a ship port, and people are coming back in from quarantine ships. Someone's got to have it at this point. And the worst possibility is all of us already have it. It's already been here longer than what it's supposed to have been, and it's just going to start affecting people slowly but surely. Because the other thing that people keep forgetting is that coronavirus, for people who aren't immunocompromised and who are younger than a certain age, are either just going to get a cold from it or just outright not going to get sick. They just become carriers for it.
Right,
it's a shame to talk about, but this thing is affecting every industry really hard right now.
Here, let me. We're pretty much done, so I'm gonna conclude the G2B stream at least.
Sure.
But we
go
can
ahead.
keep going on about this. But yeah, thanks for watching. Let me look at the schedule. It's loading. It's loaded. It's week 1, right? Yeah, Pop's tonight.
Yes. Yeah.
Pop is tonight. I'm tomorrow night, and then Friday. If yeah, we'll see what happens Friday, but maybe no one. And then Rave on Saturday. So tune in with the rest of the weekend. Thank you for tuning in, and go to bed.